I think how we're taught about ambition is largely dysfunctional and upholds oppressive systems. So we're told that ambition is more for more's sake all the time. And that can lead to burnout, that can lead to harming ourselves and others. But I actually think ambition is neutral and natural. It is for everyone. And it is simply a desire to unfold, a desire for more life, a desire for growth.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to She's Interesting. I'm your host, Rashel Hariri. I'm an award-winning marketer, consultant, and startup advisor. Today's guest is Amina AlTai, an executive coach, keynote speaker, author of The Ambition Trap, with a background in brand marketing and a powerful personal journey through burnout and autoimmune illness. Amina now helps leaders and entrepreneurs align their work with their well-being. Her approach blends business strategy with mindset, purpose, and well-being, guiding high performers to build careers that don't just look good on paper, but they actually feel good too. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, goodness. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and share your journey and talk about not just what brought you here today to become an author, to be so successful, but also to talk deep about your full journey. One of the things that we do a lot on She's Interesting is I like to break down and start from the very beginning. It's really important for me and for my listeners to know where you came from. And, what were the building blocks that got you to where you are? So you grew up in New Jersey with an Iraqi and Welsh roots. How did that shape the way that you saw yourself? I'm sure there weren't a lot of other Iraqi kids growing up. You may have felt a little bit like, what's my place in the world? But let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes, I think that being multicultural, multiracial is a really interesting lived experience and one that absolutely shaped me. When I went to high school, I was one of the few people of color in my high school. I actually didn't even realize that being brown was in the minority until I went to kindergarten and people started commenting on it or calling me names. And so it's so interesting of like your sense of self and how it's shaped in the family system. And then when you're immersed in other parts of the world, like school or other cultures where you realize, oh, I guess this identity isn't the dominant identity. And so for sure, it shaped me. It shaped my relationship to ambition and how I worked. And from a very early age, I felt the impulse to prove myself, that I have to show people that I am smart, that I can contribute, that I am valuable, that I'm worthy. And it took a long time to really undo that programming.
And what about your parents and the family dynamic? A lot of Middle Eastern parents are, they're like, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer. And so did you experience some of that growing up, that also shaped this like ambitious competitive side of you?
100%. So in the book, in the introduction, I talk about how family and identity really shaped my relationship to ambition, and in particular, my dad. So my dad is Iraqi. He was born in Baghdad. He left during the Iran-Iraq War when it was really embroiled in so much turmoil. And he finished his schooling in the UK. And then we moved to the US when I was 3. And I just watched my dad my whole life have this very tenuous relationship with ambition where he had something really big to contribute. He's super smart, but because he's a brown person with a really thick accent and thick curly hair and all the things, he never really found his place in the world of work. And I had a front row seat to watching someone's tenuous relationship to ambition, which really informed my own. And yes, my dad was very much like, so I have 4 sisters. And he was like, all of you will be doctors. And my dad was a surgeon and he would take us to the hospital with him. And it's so funny. I am very sensitive to my environment. I'm the canary in the coal mine. And he would take me to the hospital and I'd be like, there's no windows in the parts where the doctors work. Like, I can't do this. Like, I can't see that. There's no trees. Like, I can't
That's
do
so
this.
sad.
It's so sad. And so when I told my dad that I was applying to business school and not to medical school, he was so upset. And he called his family in Baghdad. And in Baghdad, they have a ranking system. So the smartest kids get to go to engineering school. Then after that, I believe is medical school, then teaching, and business is at the very bottom of the list.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so even though I was like in the top of my class, when my dad told his family, they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. We thought she was smart. Like we feel so bad for you.
That's so standard Middle Eastern where they're just like so upfront and candid, like, oh, we thought she was smarter. That's, what a shame for
Tragic
you.
for you all.
Yeah. That's well, okay. One thing I want to say, so you have four sisters. I also have four sisters. What's your rank?
Oh my God, I love this. Five girls. It's so
Yeah.
magical. You never hear that.
Yeah, it's so rare, and I don't know if you had this your parents were trying the same as mine, but they were trying to get a boy, and so
100%.
and I'm number 5, so I was the last hope.
Oh, I love that. I'm number two. I'm number
Okay.
two. Number five.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. It's interesting. What was the dynamics like with your siblings? Were you all super close growing up, and how did that shape you? And the reason why I ask is I find in my birth order being the fifth child, I've always kind of been doing my own thing. Like I've learned a lot from my older siblings of what
yeah.
I like and what I don't like. But were you kind of like the rebellious one? Were you always sort of like stepping out to do your own thing? I'd love to hear more about that.
I was very much the good girl caretaker. Like, so,
Mm,
I think we're kind of split into two distinct groups in the family. So, my older sister is 2 years older than me. Then there's me. Then there's almost a 6 year gap. And
mm,
then there's my sister Jenna. Then 2 years after her, my sister Russia. Then the last one is Xena. And there's 12 years between me and Xena.
mm.
And so the older ones were kind of like, I think we were like a little bit afraid of our parents and we really followed the rules. The three younger ones, so rebellious, did their own thing. Like the youngest one is an
Yeah,
artist.
raising my hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All three of them felt really safe in the family to come out as queer, like early on, where the
Mhm.
rest of us were just like, oh my God, there's just all these rules and rigidity and all the things.
Mm,
And so we have very sort of distinct groups.
yeah.
But it was interesting because a couple of dynamics were at play. So my mom is Welsh, my dad is Iraqi, and then we kind of represent a full genetic spectrum, if that makes any sense. Like we
Mhm,
go for like I'm the brown one in the family, and
mhm.
I'm also like 5'4", and then I have a sister who is 5'9" and blonde, and so that was also really interesting because we
Yeah.
had very different lived experiences around identity. Like I very much present as a Middle Eastern woman, and my sisters
Mhm.
do not. And so even like how I was treated in the family, because there's so much colorism inside
Mm.
of Middle Eastern culture was
Yeah.
just really different.
Yeah.
And
I
then
can
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say I can relate to that fully because, well, mind you, all of my sisters, we all have dark hair and we look the same. But in terms of skin tone, I'm much more olive than my
Mm.
sisters. And so I remember one time strictly we were at some like, we call them mehmunis where you go to someone's house and there's a bunch of people there. And this woman was saying hi to everyone. And then she looks at me, she's like, oh, she has olive skin tone. And I was like, and I didn't know, I was like 15 and I was like, yeah, I do. Like,
You're
and
like,
then
I'm
I
blessed.
yeah, and I didn't understand what she meant by that. And then I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that wasn't like a compliment to me.
Yeah,
She was saying, oh, she's different from the other four. And I had no idea. And like colorism is something that's so prevalent in the Middle Eastern community,
it
but
is.
people don't really think about it. Like if you are a Persian that's blonde, it's like, oh my God, how did you get like so European looking or Russian looking?
Yeah.
But it's so fascinating to me because as women, not only is it not safe in our own culture to just like who cares and be who you are and say what you want and present as yourself, but there's so many difficult beauty standards to achieve
Yeah.
as you're growing up. And I don't know about you, but I always joke that every Persian has a blonde phase, and I was blonde for a little while in high school because also it was the early 2000s, and that's just it was like the Paris Hilton time. But
Yes.
I wonder if you also went through that too, where you're like experimenting with different looks and trying to find yourself.
Definitely experimented with different looks and trying to find myself, but I also think I really leaned into I'm the brown one.
Mm,
And so yeah, I like really kind of embraced it, even though I had a similar experience to you where once we had a family gathering and
mhm.
my parents had assigned me the task of opening the door and taking people's coats. And somebody said to me at dinner, like, oh, you live here? I thought you were the housekeeper.
Oh my
And
God.
which is so wild, right? And being a housekeeper is a very noble profession.
Mhm.
And this is people's bias, right?
Yes.
But I also was just like, I don't know, it feels cool and special and I'm different in this way and I'm just going to lean into it. And so I just kind of did. I was like, yeah, I can be the darkest one in the room and out tan all of you. And
Well, thank you for sharing that part of you with us. I know, I mean, like I want to get into your book and talk about your business journey and all of that, but I just love to have that personal connection to know a bit about, where did you come from? What shapes you and makes you who you are? So let's talk a little bit about your career. Cause I know you were highly ambitious. You spent years in the corporate world, and that's what ultimately led to your body breaking down and you having these autoimmune illnesses that, gave you that aha moment for I need to change my life. I need to do things different. So, at what point did you realize I can't keep working the way that I am? I can't keep thinking the way that I am, and I need to change my life. I think that's super pivotal. And probably there's a lot of listeners that might be going through that right now and don't know what to do.
Yes. I had a very dramatic, what I call my stop moment, where I started my career marketing. And originally I worked in jewelry marketing. I was working for Cartier and then decided that I wanted to work with emerging female entrepreneurs. So I co founded a marketing agency with someone that I'd gone to school with. And it was a wonderful experience, but I didn't know any parts of myself, right? I was still like very much getting acquainted with who I was, and I think just starting to deprogram. So I started work being really boundaryless, deeply codependent, carrying all that baggage of feeling like I have to be the first one in, the last one out, the hardest working person in the room to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so 7 years into that business, I burned out and developed 2 autoimmune diseases. And it happened really dramatically where I had been to 7 different doctors. And it's very funny because the thing that really got me to take myself seriously was my hair was falling out. And I had,
Wow.
like a lot of hair, just like a lot of Arabs, just like thick,
Mhm.
dark hair. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden I had this like bald spot in the front. And I was like, oh no, we are not taking my hair.
Not today. No.
Not today. And so 7 different doctors. And then finally the 7th one took me seriously. And then I got a call from her one Friday while I was driving to work. And she said, if you don't go to the hospital now, instead of going to work, you'll be days away from multiple organ failure. And it was wild. And I had had all of these small signals along the way, like brain fog, not feeling well, the hair loss, all the things. And it had gotten so bad and I didn't know. And I had just this one choice, right? Do you choose to keep going the way that you're going and maybe exit the planet early, or do you choose another way? And I think for me, it had to be dramatic. And I hope for everybody else, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. I hope that people get the whispers so they don't have to get the shouts.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we do have to feel enough pain to change something.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of pain, I know in your book you talk a lot about the different ways that you can look at ambition and how oftentimes when we're so ambitious, it's coming from a place of pain or, like some sort of trauma that you've had or something that's triggered it, right? And it's coming from a painful place versus being more like I'm ambitious because of positive things. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I was really fascinated by that. And I think when you start to reflect on your own life, and this is for everyone who's listening right now, think about why you're so ambitious and, what is it that's really driving? Is it because of the need to be accepted, the need to be worthy, all of these things. And, a lot of ambitious women, it's because we were told to be a certain way and we were rewarded for it when we were kids. And then so you grow up and then you think, I have to keep doing more of that because that was always the positive signal. So let's talk a little bit about the link with pain and how you discovered this and just let's tell the listeners what that's all about.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. And I'm curious about your experience around this too. I'm like,
Yeah.
tell me more. So first of all, I think it's important that we define ambition. And what I set out to do with the book was to really reclaim it, because I think how we're taught about ambition is largely dysfunctional and upholds oppressive systems. So we're told that ambition is more for more sake all the time. And that can lead to burnout, that can lead to harming ourselves and others. But I actually think ambition is neutral and natural. It is for everyone. And it is simply a desire to unfold, a desire for more life, a desire for growth. And it goes in cycles like a perennial flower, right? So there might be a season where like I have this desire to grow, like writing the book, and I take care of my inner and outer environment. And because I do that, then I have this moment in the sun. But then guess what? The seasons change and the petals fall off and the flower goes back underground before it has to nurture itself again, before it can take aim. And I think that we need this radical redefinition of it, because so much of what we're seeing is dysfunctional and it's hurting us. And when we're coming from that more for more sake all the time, it's usually because there's a wound there. So Canadian psychologist Lise Bourbeau talks about 5 core wounds. They are rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. And for each core wound we have, we wear a corresponding mask. So for the rejection wound, the mask is avoidance. For the abandonment wound, the mask is dependence. For the betrayal wound, the mask is control. For the injustice wound, the mask is rigidity and kind of needing to live in this perfect world. And so we can have 1, 2, 3, or all 5 of these core wounds in our lives in varying degrees. And you can have the most magical parents on the planet and still have a core wound, because it's just a very human rite of passage. So our ambition may be coming from that place of pain. And that was my story, right? I felt this sense of betrayal and I thought I have to control everything in my life in order to be safe. And I did that so much so that I burned out and I got sick. But I'm curious in you hearing that, if any of it resonates with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, being the youngest of five, obviously there's benefit positives and negatives, right? There's you get a lot of attention for some things and then not for others. And often you're getting in trouble for things if you're like, you're a kid, right? And so you're always kind of like in the way and doing things. And so I think for me, the pain for my ambition is a lot of when I did really well, I would get attention and it would be good attention and positive and praise. And so that's what would make me keep going. I also think in my story, my father passed away when I was really young, when I was 5 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
so the need for security is also, and that control that you were talking about is what has always driven me to get a job when I was 15. I was like, I want to go work at McDonald's. I want to make my own money. I want to plan for myself. I want to build my career. So I've always been super ambitious in that way, but it was because I wanted to be in control of my destiny. And I
Oh.
felt like as a kid, having that taken away from you there's such a lack of control. It just happened. And so I think I definitely resonate with that.
Thank you for sharing that. That's
Mhm.
so generous of you to share that story. And it makes complete sense, right? When we've had our safety ripped from us, then we're
Yeah.
going to do all the things that we can do in order to create that safety and that stability for ourselves. And so I think that's your story is so important to hear because I think
Mhm.
a lot of the times we make ourselves wrong for having a core wound, right? Or our ambition coming from this place. It is perfectly human and it was a survival tactic. And it was our young selves being so smart and figuring out a way to take care of ourselves. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that.
Oh my, I'm such an open book about it now. I think when I was younger, I would try not to talk about it so much because I was like, I'm just like everybody else and it's cool. And then but then growing up, I was like, no, that is what makes me who I am. It's like this
Yes.
pivotal thing that happens. So let's focus on that and learn about it. And obviously therapy helps. So if anyone who's listening, go to therapy.
I was going to say, I wanted to hit on that question that you posed of, why are so many of us immigrant children kind of like seeking the prize, right? Making ourselves work so hard. Why do we feel this sense of perfectionism that we have to kind of
Mhm.
reach towards? And I think that so much of it is systemically reinforced. And then we also internalize a lot of that bias, right? So if we don't see people that look like us in certain ranks of organizations, we're going to tell ourselves the message that we don't belong there. And then we are going to work super hard, try to be perfect, do all the things to get to that place.
Mhm.
And herein lies the ambition trap, right? Is like we'll end up falling in because the system isn't always set up for people like us to thrive. And because we don't necessarily have that same foundation of safety, we'll feel that impulse to keep going, to keep working until we hurt ourselves or something else happens.
Yeah, it's really interesting to take a step back and think about these structures and to for anyone who's listening right now, think about everything that's external to you that's making you act a certain way because you want to so badly reach a goal that you have and it's making you do things that are harmful to your health and making you overwork and not spend time with family. And it makes me think a lot about this whole like quote unquote soft girl era, and people are kind of they're tired of working so hard and they want to take a step back and say like, let's go back to nature. Let's go back to bare feet on the grass and
Yes.
enjoying life again and what that looks like. And so I would love to know your perspective on being ambitious and managing that pain so that you can be productive and positive with your ambition, but then also kind of yearning for this more of a relaxed life.
I do really think that the key is allowing our ambition to go in cycles, like I was talking about before, right? Because
Mhm.
if we're always reaching towards the sun, we never give ourselves a break. And I think that ambition requires pacing, rest, and recovery. I think that's so important. And if we never give ourselves the rest and recovery, if we don't pace ourselves, we're going to be like a supernova, right? Where we burn really brightly, but we fizzle out very fast. And so this is your invitation to a soft life. And that doesn't mean that we can't have goals. That doesn't mean that we can't do an amazing thing, right?
Mhm.
I am a really ambitious person. I bet you are too. However, I'm doing it in a way that is kind to myself and to my nervous system. I want to tell you this little story because I think it's
Mhm.
fascinating. Did you watch Sprint on Netflix? It was a docu-series about the fastest runners in the world.
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I love studying athletes, especially Olympians, because I think that they teach us so much about
Mhm.
ambition and striving. And I had asked my nervous system coach, who I worked with for the last couple of years, to watch as well. And I was curious. I was like, I'm getting a sense, but I want to know what your thoughts are too. I was like, is are the fastest runners in the world, are they all dysregulated? Are they all running from something? And of the people in the documentary, maybe there was like, I don't know, 20, 30 people that they were focused on. We both could identify one that was parasympathetic, that was rest and
Mm,
digest, that wasn't coming from a place of pain, let's say. And I think that this is such a beautiful example because the dominant paradigm is to be dysregulated. The dominant paradigm is more for more sake to hurt yourself and others.
mhm.
But you can still get to the place that you want to go and be regulated and be kind to yourself. I think that it's in the minority because we haven't had those examples, but it's
Yeah.
possible. And that like blows my heart wide open.
I love everything you just said because I have actually been thinking about that a lot myself is we don't have enough examples of people who aren't control freaks and pushing hard and like just going against the motion of things to get what they want, to get that output of being successful. And so I think that is the example for the rest of us in society is all we hear is you have to push, you have to go forward no matter what. You have to sacrifice everything to get to that level of success for your business, for your family, whatever it is you're looking for. And I would love to see more examples where people can have balance and still be successful and be a bit more content internally with themselves versus always being anxious about trying to grow and make a successful business. And I would love to your point, find more examples like that. And also this is why with She's Interesting, I interview so many successful women who are change makers because I want to show that there's, that hustle that we look at is very much created by the patriarchy. And
Yes.
so we as women are putting ourselves in these environments and trying to act like the patriarchy wants men to act. And we're different. We have a cycle that works differently. We have a 4-week cycle. We are really ambitious during certain times of our cycle and we need rest during other times. And so we're putting ourselves in these pressure cooker environments without examples of other women who are like, this is stupid. I'm not doing it the way of the patriarchy. I'm going to go my own path and still be successful and rested and happy and healthy and gorgeous. For the listeners right now, take that in. It's these episodes come out on Tuesdays. It's a Tuesday early in the week. Think about how you can change the way that you're approaching your work for that week and how can you give yourself moments of rest and reflection throughout the week.
In the book, one of the things I talk about is setting kind goals. And I think that this is such an important part of being in right relationship with ambition too, because we're taught to set smart goals, right? But oftentimes those smart goals are in violation of our true selves, right? So I always ask myself and my clients, like, is this goal kind in the context of your broader life, right? So a couple of years ago, I had a client whose revenue was at 400K and she wanted to get to the $1 million mark. But in that same year, she had gotten divorced, was newly diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And so I was like, yeah, if you want 7 figures, let's go to 7 figures. But I posed the question of, is this kind? And when I asked her that question, she immediately started to cry because she was like, it's not. She's like, it's a goal I think I should chase because it feels like the next level. But actually, what's kind to myself is getting to 600K, which is a nice little stretch. It's going to grow me and taking amazing care of myself. That's kind. And I think we need to bring kindness and compassion into goal setting and ambition as well.
I resonate with exactly what you said about your client because I went through the same thing. So, this past year, last May 2024, I moved from Canada to the US. Throughout that process, my husband was in the States, I was in Canada. I had to sell the house. I had to close down my business, had to reopen it once I moved to the States, had a bunch of things to take care of, taxes, the dog, moving, everything. And for some reason in my mind, I was like, well, that's fine. Like, I'm going to carry on as normal and I'm going to get there and start networking and continue to run my business as I always did. And that is so not what happened. I was so tired. I found myself napping.
Of
I found
course.
myself resting a lot. I was talking to friends and being like, I don't know why I'm like this and like why I feel ambitious, but I feel like I can't actually move. It's like this weird, like my body physically can't do it, but mentally I'm like, let's go, let's rev. And so I 100% relate to that. And I want to just, really highlight what you said about the different seasons, especially when you're someone who's go, go, go all the time and super ambitious. You don't understand that there are different seasons. Like that concept is such a challenge to wrap your head around that it's, for me, that was my winter. That was my hibernation time. And I needed that, but I kept trying to fight against it, which to be honest, prolonged the amount of time that I think I needed to be in hibernation because I kept trying to get up and being like, nope, I'm going to do more. And then I was like, oh God, why am I so tired?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, right? We
Mhm.
exacerbate the injury if we don't give ourselves time to heal.
hmm One thing I'm really interested to talk to you about, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, is money, right?
Mm.
Because my POV is I want to help more women, and myself included, get to the 7-figure range for my business and for everyone who's listening. Because My POV is more mission driven about the more women who are doing well and making good money can make an impact on community, can make an impact on politics, can make an impact on the future of the world. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on money? What was your relationship with money growing up? And how has that changed now that you are running the show and you have your own business?
I love that we talk about this because I feel like that there aren't enough spaces where women and other historically excluded people lay bare their
Mm,
relationship to money. And I think it's so important. I'm with you. I think more money, more impact, right?
mhm.
There was a study that said that when women have more money, they reinvest 90% in their families and communities, whereas men reinvest 40%, I think. So it's
Mm,
like literally when we
sounds
have,
right.
yeah, when we have more money, we do more good. We can invest in the political candidates that we believe in. We can invest in the causes that we deeply care about. We can take ourselves on vacation. You could do whatever you want, right?
Mhm,
But more money, more impact for sure. And one of the things that I think is really important is that money is neutral. And it took me a long time to
mhm,
understand that, like ambition, right? Ambition is neutral, money is neutral. But so many of us have a charged relationship around it because of trauma, because of what we
mhm,
learned in our family systems, because of a core wound. And I think that we can't talk about money and women or other historically excluded people without talking about the context too, because
mhm,
so much of the time we make ourselves wrong, right? There's something wrong with me. I couldn't figure out money. I couldn't figure out how to get to seven figures. I couldn't figure out how to invest, right? There is nothing wrong with you. There's everything right with you. If we look at the data, it wasn't until 1974 that women could have credit cards in their own name. It was
mhm.
2009 where we had the Equal Pay Act, right? But we still don't have pay equity. We still have a wage gap, right? So there's all these forces that we're navigating against. 200 years ago, a woman was her in a heteronormative context. A woman was her husband's property, right? So
Yeah.
it's like we have centuries or thousands of years of programming to override. And I think it's so important that we acknowledge that because it's in our genes, it's in our
Mhm.
DNA. And so much of the time we're like, what's wrong with me? I can't like mindset shift myself out of this. So I
Yeah.
feel like it's so important to say that. And it took me a long time to get there where, my family was sort of really up and down with money. And that's a pattern that I replicated in my early career until I really saw my wounds and really
Mm.
saw what I was doing. And I even did a session on hypnosis to understand, well, why am I?
Wow.
It was super cool because I
Yeah.
had the first couple years of my business, the first year of business, I just wanted to replace my marketing salary. I did that. The second year I got to 250. I was like, great.
Yeah.
The third year stuck at 250 and I was like, what is happening? And I was trying all these things and I was trying to grow and I couldn't make fetch happen.
Mhm.
And then I was like, let me try hypnosis. And then I came across this memory where I learned about how much a family member made and it didn't feel safe to go above them. And so I had subconsciously kept myself in that
Wow.
space. And so I think we really have to get to know our stories, conscious and unconscious. I think we have to acknowledge what's happening systemically. And then I think it is our birthright to have as much as we desire. And kind of going back to the caveat, like similar to ambition, just checking in to make sure that that's not coming from a place of pain.
I love that it's our birthright.
It is.
And one thing I always I reflect on with myself and with my friends and family is the numbers, right? Those numbers really control us, whether it's your MRR, your monthly recurring revenue, your annual recurring revenue, and thinking about, sometimes I think, are we just thinking too small? Like there
Mhm.
are people I know that are probably down the street from me and they're making, 3, 4 times what I'm making a month and so calm and not worried that it's going to be not going to be there next month and I feel like we need to just have patience with ourselves, confidence in the flow of money and energy that's around us and the abundance, especially now with what's happening in the economy and the stocks going up and down and people are super nervous about their financial future. I think we need to take a step back and recognize that there is money flowing all over the world and that we can have a positive relationship with that we can have access to that money and that money is available to us and to stop focusing so much on the numbers. I think even with myself, I'm like 7-figure business. And honestly, I say 7-figure business because less than 3% of women in America get their businesses to
Yep.
7 figures.
Yep.
So that to me is more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, let's
I see
go.
you.
Right. But when I really break it down, does that number even matter? No, not really. It's more of how do I continue to grow and develop and then get to my dreams of, comfort and support and giving back and just changing my life.
Exactly. I'm so with you there. I'm just, how can we have more so that we can use more in ways that are more supportive?
Mhm.
And also, I just want to go deeper on what you said there too. One thing that I often think about, and I tell my clients this too, there's not less money in the world in moments like this, right? We're also, if we're like, we're going to have less and, there's so much shifting and so much uncertainty. There's not less money in the world, right? Someone has to win in this moment. Why can't that be you?
Mhm.
In recessions, innovation like skyrockets, right? Because we have to get a little more creative. We have to get a little more scrappy. And so if you are like you and you're like, I see the challenge and I will raise you, I think that this can be an amazing moment for us to get to the places that we want to go. And I think we just have to believe that and start looking for the other examples out in the world and seeing how they did it and finding our version of that.
Absolutely. More millionaires are created during recessions than any other time.
Yeah,
And it's like what Warren Buffett says, how he says when people are greedy, be fearful, and when people are fearful, you should be greedy. And I
exactly.
feel like that's where we are. So let's all the ladies forget all the guys. I know that like 20% of my listeners are men, but it's time to get greedy right now and think
Yeah.
about, how you're setting up your business, your structures, diversifying your portfolio, and really thinking about these things. And if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, seek guidance and find someone that is an advisor for you that you can pay. You have to pay for these things. Things aren't always free. And sometimes that investment of 1%, 1.5% is actually valuable to ensure that your money is making money for you.
Yes.
So, one question I have for you, because you are super ambitious and you're killing it and your book is amazing, is let's talk about the story of how you got connected with one of the top publishers for your book. This is something I'm so fascinated. I want to know the story, and I think listeners will be fascinated to see, how did you do it? How did this come together?
I think that this is actually such a beautiful story of ambition and when not to push and force.
Mm.
So in 2019, I was working on a book proposal with an agent and we worked on it together for a year. And then fast forward to March of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, and I got a call from that agent and she was like, the market is wild. I cannot take a risk on a new author. This is where we part ways. And I was heartbroken. I literally got the call while I was walking on the streets of Brooklyn. I'm outside of a pizza shop. She tells me this, and I'm just like hysterically crying in the street. And after a couple of days of moping, I had this, I coached myself and I had this moment and this realization. I was like, you know what? The work isn't what it is supposed to be. It is still becoming. I will have my moment. This just isn't it. The work is still becoming. And then I just went on my merry way and just kept doing my work. And it's so interesting because in 2020, at the height of the social justice uprisings, I ended up, however this happened, coaching a handful of celebrity girl bosses who were canceled. And my book is not an analysis of cancel culture, but it started to highlight patterns in them that I'd also seen in myself and in my other clients, right? Sort of this tenuous relationship to ambition, and then there's a fallout. And so I was just studying it. I was just studying myself, studying my clients, and seeing these patterns. And I eventually put together this framework on ambition. 2 years later, in 2022, I was teaching this framework to another client in a session. And she looks at me and she's like, where's your book? You got a book? You need a book. And I was like, I don't have a book. It's funny you should ask. And she was like, one of my best friends just became an agent. You need to meet her. And so I met her friend who is amazing. And she also studied a Buddhist lineage of meditation. And so we had a lot of sort of spiritual overlap. And I was like, I love this person. And they just completely understood me and the work right away. And that is rare. And so we worked together on a proposal for 3 months. We took it to market. We sold it in the first week of market at a
That's
preempt.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh
And
my
I tell
gosh.
this story because, and first of all, what I ended up getting for the book, what I ended up selling it for was 3 times what the original agent thought my book would sell
Oh
for.
my God. I need to like round of applause, everybody. If
Well,
you're driving, if you're drinking your coffee, put it down and clap because that's amazing.
but I think that this is such an important story to hear, right? Because
Yeah.
if in 2019 or 2020 I had pushed and forced to make it happen, it wouldn't have been the magical experience that ended up happening in 2022, which ended up being such a gift and such a belief system expander for me. And so I think it's just this great reinforcement of don't push, the timing will align, right? Nothing before its time, and what is meant for you will not miss you.
I love how you said you were coaching yourself. Do you have any tips for anyone who's listening right now who may just be going through the motions, is super ambitious, but trying to figure out, how do I get myself together? How do I get more control over my ambition and control how I show up in the world versus always being reactive to my ambition?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the short answer is get the book.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. Plug the book. Everyone get the book. Where can they get the book?
You can get the book anywhere you buy books, whether that's your favorite indie bookstore or national chains. It is available everywhere. But so basically the way that I designed the book is there are tons of exercises because I'm a coach and I'm always taking myself through these exercises and my clients through these exercises. And I will say, I think awareness is like 80% of the work. And so there's a whole section on how to understand which are your core wounds and if they're driving your ambition, how to pivot from painful to purposeful ambition. And it's all through the lens of compassion. I never want anyone to judge themselves for where we've been or if our ambition has gone awry, right? It's a perfectly human rite of passage. And now we're inviting ourselves to go another way. And so if you can get the book, it's just full of exercises that will help you really reconcile your relationship to ambition and choose a more aligned way moving forward.
I think you're absolutely right. I talk to a lot of different women, and some of them say, I want to get a coach, but I don't know who's the right coach for me. So what advice do you have on figuring out who's the right coach for you? And for people that are listening, how do they know that they're the right clients for you?
Yeah. Thank you for asking this question. There's a quote in Vedic philosophy that translates to go towards what charms you. So go towards what feels warm. If you feel like there's a coach that you've been looking at and listening to and reading their stuff, and you're like, there's something about this person, go toward them and see if you can do a consult with them. We learn so much in the consultation. I design my consultations in a way to be so revealing because I want to get to know people, where their pain is, and to get a sense if I'm the right teacher and support system for them. And I always say I celebrate whether somebody is for me or not for me because they're clear, right? So if you leave a conversation and you're clear that I'm not the right person or I am the right person, that is huge. That's the biggest step that we can take. So go towards what charms you. See if you can set up time to really connect with these people and understand, is this person the one that can hold me and stretch me and help me get to the next level? And then in nervous system work, we say decide, take action, observe, respond. So decide that this is your coach, take action, put down the deposit, observe what happens. How is your life shifting? Respond accordingly.
I love that. I love that. We're going to clip that and use that on social media because I think everybody needs to think about that. You have to take action. Sometimes we get stuck in analysis paralysis and overthinking. And, I've been talking to friends who've been thinking of getting a coach for 6 months. Like, just pull the trigger, pull the trigger, have the call, put the deposit, start something. And if it doesn't work out, then at least you tried, right? You're not just sitting there trying to resolve things on your own.
Exactly. And I also think that the right coach will help you get under why you're afraid to take action, right? So, if someone says to me, oh, I don't know, like I'm really feeling in a maybe, I'm like, no, you choose your no or you choose your yes. What's getting in the way there, right? And then we basically unearth a whole pile of fear that we didn't know was sitting there. So the right people will also help you decide.
One thing I'm curious about is, what has been your best investment personally and in your business?
I love that question. And I think it's such an important one. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I have lit my fair share of money on fire.
Fun times. Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
There are things that I have invested in a lot of money and not seen a return. And, I definitely early in my career, especially as a coach, I had shiny object syndrome where I was like, oh, let me work with that person and that's going to solve all my problems. There is no one thing that is going to solve all your problems. I think that's a really important thing to remember. But yeah, I probably would say therapy, coaching have just shifted my life because they help you see yourself and what you can't see in yourself. And I think they will always be my strongest returns on investment. And the thing that I love about both therapy and coaching is that it teaches me tools that then I can teach onward. And that just becomes invaluable for me. And I can actually, do the math and see the return on the investment, which is pretty cool. So I think it's super important that we never stop investing in ourselves. And if you do light money on fire, just learn from it. Don't shame yourself, learn, and then, make different choices moving forward because we've all been there.
I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking about my POV on money versus my husband, where I will think about something, pros and cons list. Should I do it? Should I not? And then he'll just come in my office and be like, did you do the thing? And I'm like, no, I haven't done it yet. He's like, just do it. Who cares? It's like $5,000 or it's $2,000. Just go, like, invest in yourself. Yeah. And I think it's nice to have reminders around you, whether it's your partner or your friends or your siblings or just, like your coach or someone to remind you it's not that deep. Yeah. It's not that, it's money. It's not that deep. Spend it.
And also I think as entrepreneurs, like part of the process is trial and error. And I live a very trial and error life. And we have to get on the court. We have to understand what works for us. We have to understand what doesn't work. So then we can make a different choice moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I just had so much fun. Thank you for joining the podcast. I'm so excited that I met you. And I feel like we have such a good, maybe just on my side, but I feel like we have a good connection.
Same. I was like, in my head, I'm like, how can we be friends after this? I'm like, I want to figure out all the ways I can support you. I want to know about your life.
No, honestly, we will definitely stay connected. I will send you my contact and we'll stay in touch. If I come down to New York, I'll let you know. But this has been so fun and such a great way to start my day, honestly, because I recently have been having great conversations with women like yourself who I feel like are just really like spiritually connected, but also really intellectual. And it's so much fun having these conversations because I learned so much from brilliant women like you. So thank you again for being on the podcast. One more time, I want to plug your book. So please tell everyone where they can find it and just a little blurb about, the ambition trap.
Thank you so much for having me. I felt like I was sitting down with a sister today. It was so
Mhm.
fun to get to know you, to learn from you. I love your depth, your clarity, all of it. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone so much for listening. You can get my book, The Ambition Trap, How to Stop Chasing and Start Living, everywhere you buy books, whether that's an indie bookstore or a national chain or online retailer. And the book is how to reconcile our relationship with ambition, how to make it stop hurting and to allow ourselves to really flourish. And so I hope you'll find the book super helpful. I wrote it for you all. And if you do find it helpful, shoot me a note and tell me how it's changed your life or your relationship to ambition, please.
Oh my God. I love that. Maybe we'll do a She's Interesting book club and we'll go through the book because I've read through parts of your book and I was like, this is amazing. This needs notes. Like it needs notes and it needs conversation with friends so you can share. And I think that's, it's beautiful. So again, thank you so much. Thank you everyone who is tuned into She's Interesting. You know where you guys can find us on all streaming channels, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to rate and review and follow us on social media and subscribe to the newsletter as if I haven't asked you for enough. But thank you so much.